What is going on, everybody? My name is Ian Robinson, and welcome to another ZBrush special live stream. We have some really cool, fun guests today and some processes that we haven't talked about a lot of. So you're definitely going to want to be here for that. So thank you, everyone, for joining because it's going to be really cool. But before we get started on that, real quick, let me just run through a few things about what we do and why we have tools for you to be creative in your process. So first things first, we are Maxon. So maxon.net, where you can find tools like ZBrush, Cinema 4D, Redshift, Red Giant, etc. If you want to be able to create things like video games, you want to be able to create things like movies, toys, etc. Toys is a big one for me, especially since we're here. This is the place you can do it. And of course, we're going to be sharing a link in the chat, which we just did right now. So basically, this link will take you here, which will allow you to connect to a lot of these events that we do on a day-to-day basis. So we do have our Maxon events, where you can come through and see all the following stuff that we're doing, not only from like trade shows and community meetups, but also with live streams like this, where we are talking about all sorts of special processes, especially Mer-May. And then, of course, we have a place where you can learn training. So if you are new to 3D, or if you want to catch a live stream, or you missed the live stream and want to catch the VOD, you can definitely come over to the Maxon training or the Maxon ZBrush channel, where we do a lot of live streams there as well. And you can see a lot of artists and their processes and catch up on tutorials. And then as well, speaking of tutorials, we do have Cineversity. Pardon me. So Cineversity allows us to actually show you, for the most part, all of the Getting Started series, all the tutorials about how to use our software. So for example, you want to get started in ZBrush, then it's 100% free. Just come on in there, create an account. The Getting Started series will be free for you to come through and actually take a look at how to get started in these tools. And a shout out here to Anna Carolina, who actually came in and helped out with the Getting Started for ZBrush. So that whole link takes you all the way there, including a free t-shirt. So if you basically take that link, do the free t-shirt down here as a thank you for being here. And of course, the code for that will be, I believe it is particles. It's going to be thrown in the chat here. So particle magic. It would be the code there. So thank you, Kyle, for dropping that in the link. And then, like I said, last but not least, we have some special guests. So we're going to bring them on out here real quick, fast, and in a hurry. Well, what's going on, everybody? How are you?
Hi.
Cool.
Hi, everybody.
So, hey. So, okay. So we're going to go. Well, for me, it's kind of clockwise here. So we're going to start with you, Whitney. Go ahead and introduce yourself. What do you do, and why do you do it so well?
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, thank you guys so much for having me. This is such an amazing opportunity, and I'm really honored to be here. So thank you. And yeah, I'm Whitney. I work in toys and animation. I am the person that kind of bridges the gap between the two worlds. I make sure that there's a lot of really fun storytelling in the toy. And then I also work with the storytellers to make sure that there are a lot of really fun toyetic moments in the stories without feeling like a slimy force fit. So I have a really unique and fun job. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about my process here with you guys today.
Yay. And Lauren, how you actually, yeah, Lauren, how you doing? How you doing? What do you do?
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I am an illustrator and character designer. And I also spend way too much time on social media doing a lot of shenanigans on there. I have mostly worked in regards to character design, visual development in the kids television sector, and I've done a few toy designs with Whitney and Pixel, and then I'm also known for drawing my followers. So I started this series called Coffee Draws, where every morning I woke up while I drank my coffee, and I would randomly select a follower in the comment section to choose and draw, and like I creep on their page and draw them. And that slowly evolved into drawing people's pets, and then drawing people's pets to people. So I'm the pets to people artist. And then also I am one of the hosts, along with Whitney, of Mer-May.
Yay. Awesome. Awesome. And last but definitely not least, Juan Carlos, known as JC. How are you doing? Introduce yourself. What do you do?
Good. Yeah, as you said, I'm JC, or Juan Carlos. I'm Whitney's husband. I'm a commercial director and generalist, so I worked with Disney, Nike, Apple, and a bunch of other brands. I'm here to answer a lot of questions because I've done it all. I've done drawing, animation, I've done 3D, photography, everything. and that's how I ended up doing more directing, because I kind of knew a little bit about everything. So here today, I'm just going to be sculpting and answering any questions.
Oh, that's awesome. That's super awesome. So like you said, we have definitely a really fun show that's going to be going on. But of course, as always, if anybody in the chat has questions while the process is happening, please feel free to ask your questions, and then we'll get to them as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and kick it off with Mer-May. Tell us about this. Tell us about this contest.
Sure. So Mer-May is a drawing contest and drawing challenge similar to Inktober, but during the month of May, artists all over the globe will draw mermaids every day in the month of May. And it was actually started and founded by Disney animator Tom Bancroft. He's also the creator of Mushu. But in 2016, he drew a mermaid in May and coined the hashtag Mer-May, and it went viral, and artists just started jumping on this really wholesome, beautiful bandwagon of drawing mermaids. And then eventually there were prompts, official Instagram page, there are prizes, and now Whitney and I host, along with Tom. We all kind of come in and out, and we create events, we interview artists and our judges, and then we host live drawing sessions on the official main page. And then at the end of May, we choose a winner, and they get to win a bunch of really fun prizes. So yeah, that's basically all we do. That's Mer-May.
Nice, nice. And as I know, we're going to be going through the whole process, or at least parts of the process today. Starting here, we obviously have a 2D sketch. Can you talk about the process of creating a sketch like that, especially if you know it's going to be sculpted later?
Yes. So this is quite different, because mostly when I create the explorations of a character for a client, I personally am really pose motivated, movement motivated, and that is not really beneficial to a 3D modeler or a sculptor. And so these orthographics here that you see on the screen really show you the volume of a character. So maybe I might start out with a sketch that's really stretched anatomically, really, like I said, movement motivated, perhaps violates a few physical laws of anatomy. But when it comes to these orthographics here, you kind of take all of those pieces and draw them in a way that reflects the volume that they are, really volumetric, and making sure that for the most part, I'm not the most perfect turnaround artist, but for the most part, lining up all of the characteristics and shapes of the character along these visual lines that they match up in rotation. So that is what we have here. And this is actually a sculpt. This is a more developed version of the character that we created last fall, or was it summer, Whitney? I can't remember.
Man, I don't know. It's like 6 months ago, maybe more. I don't know. It was a while ago.
It's a while. But this project started last year, and Whitney and I came up with this character. And the only sort of brief that I had from Whitney, or between the two of us, was this character needed to have simple shapes. And we referred to her as the blobby mermaid. Blob.
Yeah.
She's the blobby mermaid. So that we could start easy and ease our way into the sculpting process. Right, Whit?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so I hadn't sculpted since I graduated college, basically. And I remember loving sculpting. I love ZBrush. And JC taught me everything. I remember I had a job interview at Activision, and I was like, I'm going to sculpt Willem Dafoe.
Nice.
And I did. And it was so cool. And I never got back into it. I didn't get the job, so I didn't end up sculpting anymore, really. But I loved it. And so yeah, when Dell came to us and they gave us this like insane laptop, both of us, and it had this crazy GPU, and we had to like kind of demonstrate the power of this computer, I was like, hey, let's sculpt something instead of just doing a 2D piece, which is what Lauren and I are so used to. And so I said, can you design something and I'll sculpt it, but please make it simple because I haven't sculpted in forever, you know? And so she did. She designed this really cute, super cute, simple mermaid. And then I went into it and got so into it, like so into the detail and the design that I was like back in Willem Dafoe days, like right away. I was like, I'm gonna get so detailed, and I was having such a good time. So then I started thinking of it like, well, maybe we should do something with this, not just have this turn of a mermaid, like maybe I can turn it into a toy. And I had been wanting to design my own toys forever because I've been designing toys for everyone else for 15 years. And I've been like waiting for that juicy moment where I could like actually make my own thing. So yeah, Dell made it happen, Lauren made it happen, and we ended up creating something that we think is really special, and a lot of people seem to really love her. And we're just so grateful.
Her name. So she went from Blobby Mermaid, and we chose Blobby Mermaid because we wanted her to have really round, blob-like features.
Just simple shapes, yeah.
But then Whitney, you took this manatee-like tail fluke in your toy design and really expanded it and it so that she could stand. Here, Whitney can show you. And
look at that booty.
Oh yeah, quite the
yes. Yeah, so yeah, we turned it from a manatee tail to a lily pad. So that's why her name is Lily.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she holds a pen. She can hold your rings. She's cool. She had hair, and so we took it off, and we're creating a bunch of different hairstyles just to add like that playability, that play factor. And then she's gonna be a blank toy, so you can paint her yourself. And there's also this cute little lotus flower because she's a lily now.
And
That's
it's like a spinner. Isn't that fun?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that it spins. That's I already love that aspect of that because you could just like sit there and just spin it with your finger. Yeah. That's super cool.
Yours is better.
Yeah, well look at this. You guys, this is a fun little tangent story, but Whitney was bringing these one-of-a-kind prototypes in her bags, and we met up in Silicon Valley last month, and she was going to give me this prototype, but TSA broke it.
Yeah, they broke it apart and left a cute little note in my suitcase that was like, we were here. And I was like, I thought it was so weird. I had this little note that was like, TSA, you know, searched your bag. And I thought, how'd they get in there? Because I locked the hard suitcase. So I seriously have no idea how they got in. But they scanned it, saw that there were toys in there, and they thought, these look suspicious. Maybe there's drugs in them. And there weren't, of course. But like, they broke them apart and left me a cute little note. And I was just like so upset about it.
Yeah, you can't use you gotta get more infill in there. More infill.
More infill. Now I know. And the thing is I was gonna put them in my backpack, but I thought they'd be way safer in the hard case. And like apparently not. I did not think about TSA being a problem.
No, not at all. Especially since I've brought prints onto a plane. I've put them in the bag. I've checked them before, and never once had that issue. And I remember you sharing that post on your Instagram while we were at GDC, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's insane.
I know.
Yeah.
So, well, unfortunately, mine has a little glue line, but I'm thinking maybe I'll like bedazzle her tail, and you won't even be able to see it. But that's what we mean. She's completely customizable. She's completely blank. That's why our turn here, the turn of our Lily on screen, she's kind of like this grayish white because she's completely customizable. Paint her the way that you like.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so now at this point, so we have like a concept that's finished, and now we want to move into the next stage. So, Juan or Whitney, when you're looking at these concepts and stuff, obviously you're collaborating with Lauren and anyone else who's drawing. What is it that you like? Do you guys do like a back and forth before you attempt the sculpt, or you just dive into it and just like, what's your process in starting this now that you got it from a concept?
You know, designers tend to be busy, so they're just like, here's the drawing, I need you to get started, and then I'll come back to notes. Obviously there's different ways to work, but Whitney will just continue working on something else. I know that I just need to get something down. You know, and Lauren, you mentioned like maybe it's not as tight as you want it to be a turnaround, but for the most part, you discover things as you go in 3D. I know some studios want it to be matched exactly, but you'll see some things change as you kind of build it out. Also, something that I like that ZBrush has, it's like the rendering feature or adjusting lights, because sculpture is affected by lighting. So you might be sculpting something in this lighting, but it might be different if you like shine a light in a different angle. So you have to consider all these things that may not be easy to do on a turnaround. So I'd rather just kind of get started with the forms. And just to remind everybody, if they're getting started in sculpting or even drawing, most things are just really simple forms like the pyramid, the cube, and the sphere. So that's how I kind of think about these things and just try to find out what are the different parts and what would I use to kind of build these out so that I could really adjust them quickly and easily. And later on, I can merge them and soften them. But there's a lot of things that are easily modified if you just keep them separate, big separate shapes. And I think if you're a beginner, it's really easy to understand. This is like, elementary stuff where it's like, this is a little bit more defined, but you could treat the arms as cylinders. The body is somewhat of a cylinder, the head is a sphere, ears are kind of flattened cylinders, and the ponytail is also some sort of sphere. And that kind of helps really figure out the masses and see how close you get. I think another great feature is that you can use the see-through button, the slider, right? I don't know if you can see it, but if you have it on your machine, you go see-through, you have Lauren's turnaround, and you can see how close you are. I do think that translating from something from 2D to 3D has its natural changes because of lensing, right? Your eyes are different, camera lens is different, computer lens is different. So whatever it's been drawn in, it might change from front to side. And that's kind of the sculptor's job to really find that kind of middle ground, see if you can find an appealing kind of in between. But then you also go back to your designer and be like, what do you think? And they'll just kind of sketch on top of it. And just figure out like maybe my drawing wasn't good and your sculpt wasn't either. So we kind of chat about what works best there. But yeah, if you guys want to follow along, this file has been made available, and the way it's set up, if you brought it in as an OBJ, it's got polygroups. You kind of mess around with these things separately by using the move topological. What I like to do is to separate these groups. So once you have these groups, you can just go and split them up, and what you end up getting is actual different subtools, so you don't kind of mess up what you're sculpting on by mistake. But yeah, that's how I get started. I think it's always back and forth. Whitney's a great sculptor, so she can actually jump and actually sculpt on this. Or sometimes, again, she's busy, so she'll just do an overlay and draw, like in Photoshop or something. And something really cool in Photoshop is like if you bring this in as a still, a designer can just use liquify and be like, that's the nose. It'll retain the shading because it's like you're liquefying it, and then I can match that easily versus like a draw over. But yeah, there's so many different ways. I think it's always being flexible with your timeline. The beginning stages is figuring it out. There's not that crazy pressure that maybe you might think there would be in a production studio. That's closer to the end. But in the beginning, you're feeling out like how you work with that designer and like how much you can do on your own versus having somebody else help you out.
Yeah, exactly. And to speak a little bit more on draw overs, I personally have had my fair share of draw overs with companies like Funko and stuff that I used to work for. So when you guys do draw overs, like, is it when you see massive change to one of your models, like, does that freak you out, or is that something that like you just take that as positive critique? Like, okay, good, I got it to a point where this is a good start, but clearly we need to now push it further. Like, what's your advice to when somebody would see a massive draw over change to something that they've spent a few hours on?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. I don't know if a lot of people talk about the stamina of being an artist and doing this day in, day out. Some people have a better affinity towards just wanting to do this for so many hours. But I think it's like, it depends on the person. You might really enjoy it, be like, yes, I can sculpt again. You might not like those changes and just, you like go with it. But I think there's two ways around it. It's like, if it is like, oh man, I spent 2 hours, I think it's important as an artist to really kind of think of yourself as an athlete of sorts. You gotta stay focused some way. So if you need to take a break, you need to go eat, you need to kind of really be aware of where your mental state is at. because this isn't the first time you're going to get a do-over. This is going to go on for years and years and years. So it's
True.
just the beginning, and it's not bad. So finding ways to reward yourself is also important. Like those 2 hours, you did a great job. It's not you did wrong. You actually, it's more of a conversation. You helped form the conversation so that the designer can respond to that. A lot of people always complain about the client, like, oh, I don't know what they want. It's like, I don't think a lot of people know what they want because you're exploring. It's a conversation of sorts that needs, push and pull. And I think you just need to be part of that and enjoy the process. And if it's a little bit hard, then just kind of, return to your foundational skills of like, it's all just pushing and pulling, right? And just being aware when you have to redo something versus like trying to polish a turd, it's also important. But some of these things you just got to trial and error out. You try it out. If it doesn't look good, the designer will tell you, speak up, ask them if they have a better approach. But yeah, Whitney, how do you respond? Because this also happens in like, I've sculpted something, went in the wrong direction. You're like, that's not where I wanted. And now I asked, I'll do like, turns. I'll do them really quickly here. You can just kind of give her like a front, and maybe it's too early. I'm like, you know what? I'm tired. I need more direction because I'm noodling. I'm taking too long. I feel like I'm not progressing. So I'll just send her a screen grab of like
Yeah.
3 angles, and I'm like, you draw it. I feel like I can go further. I can start sculpting the hair, but Ian, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to spend 2 hours. I think because I'm lazy. I want to spend 1 hour.
No.
So
Yeah.
I think the designer will make me move faster and not destroy my work if I like realize like, I think I want to get the major shapes down before I start getting into the hair. Because if I get into the hair and then ask for notes, now I have to redo that as well if there's something totally off. So just kind of being aware, if you have the ability to kind of ping that designer earlier to just lock things down, doesn't matter.
Nice.
You'll still have to redo stuff, but maybe sometimes it's easier to just be like, Whitney, check these out, do some drawings. She might be like, you know what? My boss told me I need to change something totally different. So it's not even her fault. It might be like some other person. She's like, they need long hair now. The short hair doesn't read in the animation. All these weird things can happen in production. But yeah, I think it's just about open communication. And also, if you're having fun for 2 hours, who cares? If you're not, then like maybe want to ask yourself why.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Hey, real quick, just so you know, if you want to stamp real quick on the screen on that, instead of switching out of 2.5D, just hit Shift and S, and that will stamp on the screen, and then Control N clears it.
Ooh.
So
I love it.
We'll make it real easy for you.
Well, that's the sauce right there. Look at that.
Yeah. So cool. So we do have a question. I think this is a nice big fun ones here. So he said, "Hi, how can I manage differences of colors of the render while switching from PC to the phone? How do I find the right balance in order to have good visual results independently of the device? Thank you."
Ooh, that, working in commercials, I have that. That's an ongoing problem with everybody. You have the client on a PC, you have the designers working on Macs, you have the director working on a different monitor that's calibrated for print. I think if you don't have the same device, you're going to have to kind of imagine those changes. The ideal scenario is that, like Apple products tend to be on the same color profiles. Another way is to see, it really depends. Like I have a fancy schmancy monitor that is color calibrated. So you can tell it, hey, I'm trying to match to like a movie projector versus like an iPhone and an iPad. But other monitors don't have that capacity. So it's really kind of like, if you were to paint this or render this, then you have to kind of test it out on your final product or final display mechanism. So in this case, probably the iPhone, if you're doing for social media, you have to just do versions. And I think production is not just like the fun, it's the production of it. It's that kind of like passing files, testing things, quality assurance. and that's part of the job, you know. So you have to get used to being like, I'm not done yet, but I want to check where I'm at. Send it to your phone. I think it's brute
Mhm.
force. There's no like, I got the solve for you, unless you have everything Mac, you know, everything Apple.
Yeah, and actually, too, a question for Lauren as well. So the image you showed originally was black and white ortho. Do you sometimes provide color options as well in your sketches that you would like to see happen in the sculpts?
Yeah, I have a term. Hold on, let me pull it up. Second. I did a turn of last year's mermaid mascot, Bubbles.
Bubbles.
Remember her?
Yeah, the farty mermaid. She's the best.
This that was one of the most complicated turns. It was so hard.
I love
And
her.
it was fully colored. 1 second. Mermaids. There she is.
Yeah, I always, while you're pulling that up, I always find color to be quite interesting, especially since in ZBrush we can poly paint everything, right? So we can get the vertex color happening. And myself, I try to, if I'm going to spend time painting it in ZBrush, a lot of times I try to use that texture map as well into my final render, especially if I go into like Substance Painter or something. So it's always kind of cool to, like, you know, when you're spending that time to try to figure it out, what it is you want to end up doing. Well, with the colors like this, does this stuff get transferred to poly paint? Like, do you guys paint that as well?
Oh yeah, I've had times where like I need to bust out a concept really quickly, and
Mhm.
even if you have like a really blobby kind of blocked out model, you can just kind of like like just project it, just project even that
Oh, really?
yeah, that illustration. And you know, like if you go to C4D or other products, like you can project from camera, and you turn around and it's all skewed, but it'll get you there, because then you'll have like even things that you didn't realize, like your eyes were a little bit off because it had projected the paint on top of them, and you're like, whoa, my eyes need to be lower or higher. And then you can
Mm.
sample off of the areas that were painted to kind of fix areas. So I definitely use that both for like getting the color on, but also to see if my model's completely off. And again, 2D to 3D is a little bit of a transition, but sometimes you do discover like 2D has way more of a design sense, and like those eyes were placed there specifically. And in 3D, some people tend to kind of start to rely on like realism, so things start to get more like natural in terms of size. Eyes get more naturally sized, the shapes get more traditional, you know. And then you project this and you're like, whoa, like I need to be a little bit punchier here and there, if it's a stylized piece, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting some questions in, and then we can go to the next stage of the sculpt. By the way, this blockout is really cool. And I like how you have everything broken up into poly groups. Wink, wink. That's awesome. But the question we have here is, what is more common for you to give ortho turns or working from a pose, or is it both? So yeah, do you do turns, or poses, or T pose? Like, what's your main approach?
That's Marty. That's my friend. Hi, Marty.
Hey, perfect.
I'd love to talk about different industries, because I think sometimes questions are directed to like, what's the right way, what's the most common way.
Yeah.
And I think there are different workflows in games, toys, commercials, and film, or anything in between. Like if you're doing like a music cover for somebody, you know. So sometimes it's really about like the pipeline. Like for for me, I love to get the gesture and then the A pose or the T
Mhm.
pose. That's going to help me understand like, does the A pose or T pose need to have some gestural qualities to it, like some, and that also informs like the rigor. If this is going to go to animation, like they might ask you to do it differently. Like sometimes there's like a natural, you know, bend for women, like in the elbow area, for example, versus just stiffer, because the way that you set out joints in animation sometimes need to be straighter, but a rigger might not want it that way. So it's kind of dependent on your pipeline. But I think for me, it's kind of getting that gesture down first to get understanding of that character. Because again, I think the sculptors aren't just like these people that execute somebody's design. I think you add your own kind of perspective to this, and a T pose and A pose won't inform you as much about that character as that kind of gestural thing. So gestural thing is really important, and the mechanical version of like an A pose, T pose is fine for proportions and just kind of like the production side of it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, nice. Very cool. Very cool. And then we have another one. Anyone can feel free to take this one too. I always feel I crank the subdivisions way too early. Been there, done that. I feel ya. What are some cues to know when you need more polys?
Okay, so I love this question because I think initially when I started learning ZBrush, which is more than a decade ago, there was this idea of starting low to then go high. But in real life sculpture, when I studied that, you're always ultra subdivided, right? It's clay, it's atoms. So I think there's something really cool about ZBrush where, don't worry, you can Z-remesh and Dynamesh. And I think let me do a quick sample here. I'm just gonna take like a Z-sphere, sorry, not a Z-sphere. Let's just take this and convert that. See how crazy you can get.
Oh, let's go nuts.
Yeah, you know those pictures, it's like it's a cube and then it's like a photoreal person, and you're like, you didn't need to start with a cube. It's just like the funny, like, can you believe it, you know? Yeah, you're like, anybody can do that. Anyway, you can take any shape, right, and just turn it into a sphere.
That's
Yeah,
magic.
it's like I don't want to slide through that right now. It's like the star was there. So as this Z remeshes, maybe it's too high. The idea is going to be like, I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that kind of proves the point that it's like there's no right way of doing it. So this is fairly high. It's not like super blocky as I was showing that mermaid. So kind of blocking out that skull allows me, and I'm subdivided here again. So it's like, I don't know how many polys. Yeah, it's like 100,000 polys. That's pretty high considering. I mean, it's go even higher. This is now almost 500,000 polys. Okay, so if you take like dam standard, for example, which is common practice in like some sculpting methods with clay, is that you can start carving out like your symmetry line, just like if you're drawing. This is also helpful for people that love to draw, where you can kind of just block in the shapes you want. And I don't think you could do this in low, you know what I mean? So you kind of want to mark in, this is where your skeleton would be. Again, some people want to start more like the Lily one that I did, which is more shape-based, but this is more like drawing-based. It helps you kind of create a character too without committing to forms yet. You know, you can just kind of block it out, the ear, maybe the neck will come out through here. And it can be loose. And don't worry about all the scratchy stuff. Like you can kind of keep that and create a cleaner version later on, but this will allow you to just kind of block it in really quickly. Now you know where the lips could go. It could go right here. You know, and then like you don't have to commit, because now you have some proportions that you're like locking in. It's like maybe the chin needs to be more pronounced. And so I guess I am curious, like as a follow-up question to you, like what is it that you like to sculpt? If you're doing organic stuff, I think, and if you want to be conceptual, I think there's different ways. There's conceptual, where you're doing the concept on your own from sculpting, and then there's matching. I think matching, sometimes it's easier to kind of just start like low poly to block it out. But if you're like having fun, I think high detail is like pretty fun to me. It reminds me of drawing, but also this is so familiar to real life, right? Like you're playing with Play-Doh as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is really fun to me, just seeing like the clay build up. I think it's just like a visual satisfaction of sorts, you know. And if you're not familiar, just this will get really easy if you haven't used ZBrush before. Or you're getting started, like the hitting B, and then being like, okay, I want the move brush. So it's like M, and then just finding that one and kind of memorizing some of these. So it's V in this case. So B, M, V is the move brush. So
Yep.
that's what I'm switching between. If you see me kind of doing that a lot. Anyway, that's my take on it. Curious what you guys think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Whitney, you want to crack at that question too?
Nah.
She's like, he said it all. He said everything.
That was so fun to watch. I'm like, man, you're such a good teacher.
Oh my gosh, how cool is that? Is that another mermaid?
This is like a baking show, right? Like they will have already baked the final cake, and this is the final cake.
Oh my gosh, how cool!
Yeah, that's super cool.
And
Yeah.
she's made out of the base lily that everybody has access to. So that's kind of the goal as I go to kind of turning this base model to tell you like realistic stuff is the same as simplified stuff. It's all based out of the same forms. And if you just stack and repeat what you know about forms, then you'll get there. So, you know, muscles, no muscles, all that fun stuff is related, whether you're doing realistic or not.
Yeah, exactly. I always found that the approach isn't necessarily what matters. At the end of the day, it's what the end result you're striving for, and that you're constantly pushing to get to that end result. So I think that's a fantastic answer. We do have another question real quick, and it was actually going to kind of lead into like what you're starting to manipulate the shape here. So the question is, can you guys help? I'm stuck in how to match proportions of portraits. Now, obviously, you know, we'll extend that question more to what you're doing here, matching proportions of the sculpture, because I feel like it's 6-to-1 on that one. So when you are looking at a concept and you are trying to match proportions in ZBrush, is there things that you do, little tricks, or is it more of a visual approach in practice?
I think there's like different schools of thought of like tracing versus not tracing. You know, some artists are like, did you do it from memory? Did you use reference? Did you trace? Some people would just go through like the see-through slider to kind of mark in proportions from an actual photograph. If you want to get better at like recognizing like what my face is made out of, or like what Whitney's or Ian's or Lauren's is made out of, again, just break it down to like spheres, pyramids, and cubes, or circles and lines, and also pay attention to like S curves and C curves and straight lines. Just kind of like break it down to really simple forms and really pay attention to the sizes. You know, like my eyes are clearly smaller than my nose, so just start thinking about measurements, and that's when you can start pushing and pulling. Like, well, so in your head, you have to verbalize these things. Don't just like watch, really kind of analyze it and put words to what you're looking at. Some people like to use food analogies. Oh, this looks like a potato or like a chicken leg. I think really start using your words to speak through these things, and be like, okay, if I'm doing cartoony and this guy has smaller eyes than this, can I push the small? Can I push the big? And if you want a really good book, I think it's Mad Caricatures, and the comic magazine that used to exist. They have a guide to like creating faces and how to caricature, which is different than just like distortion. Caricature really keeps like the soul of like that person or character you're building, but it really breaks it down. I'll go back to my terrible sculpt over here. How to recognize.
Beautiful. It's abstract.
How to, yeah, I'm gonna do some really simple thing. There's a lot of guides there, but the most useful one to me was that everybody's face is a T, a letter T. And the brows can be a T like that, and then the nose straight down. It could be a T like this, where the goes down shorter. You know, so all of these will then allow you to kind of fill in the eyes. You know, the eyes are like more slanted, the nose is like this big, and the mouth can be like whatever shape you want. So just recognizing the T in the character will give you different results. You know, the length of that T, like very short nose, you know, that's like a bully. And now you have all this space for the mouth, you know, so like, so just being able to play around with the shapes and just understanding that it's like measurements pretty much. If you want to be really mechanical about it, there are so many like traditional like cut it into thirds, you know what I mean? Like everything's the third. Nobody's face is like that. Most of them, if they are, they're like a perfect face. They're kind of boring, and that's why most film actors are maybe good looking, but they're not actually regular. You have to be recognizable. So just keep that in mind. There's like the thirds one, it'll make something boring. Realism is in those differences. You know, even really beautiful people, they tend to have like maybe their lips are too exaggerated, but that's what makes them look good or, you know, interesting. So yeah.
Tom said something once in one of his, I think it was one of his courses, that he was talking about when you're building up the shapes of a character. You know, a lot of people will do just like what you said, JC, a lot of perfect, all similar shaped, similar sized mouth, nose, and eyes. And he referred to those as like the medium shapes. When you're able to mix large and small shapes in with your medium shapes is when you really get a recognizable, cool character. So I always love that. Thank you for pulling Tom in.
I have a thing to share. When I sculpt dolls, I often will have symmetry, but then at the end, I'll have an asymmetrical feature just to make it feel unique, you know, and interesting. But this was a Rapunzel styling head that I worked on. And you can see that her smirk is a little off to the side. Why is it? I don't know. Here we go. That's a little bit better. She's unpainted, right? But yeah, you can see how there's like an asymmetry here, and it just created a really nice visual interest working on that in that way. And also, she has like a kind of quirky smirk in most of her character art as well. So yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
Your character a wink.
Yeah. I always wanted to push the expressions in dolls, but kids get freaked out when there is like a permanent wink or something like that. They even get like a little uncomfortable when the eyes are to the side, which is pretty common nowadays. But some kids will be like, "Look at me," you know, like they want them to look at them. But yeah, I'm always trying to push expressions and personality in dolls.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help that, you know, there are some horror films out there with just dolls in general, so that's already exacerbating the odd stuff that we would do in toys. So yeah, absolutely.
True.
Well, speaking of like, you know, just toys in general and stuff, like, so as JC is working on this, can we talk a little bit about the actual like prep for 3D print? What do you like when you're moving to the next step to manufacturing it? How do you approach the prototype phase of your actual sculpture and move it through the pipeline?
That's a great question that involves the designer or the person who's kind of leading the project. So I'll let Whitney talk a little bit about what we've done, but also other projects she's done with toys. There's definitely the goal for it to be playable, not just a maquette, right? So when it comes to toys, there's definitely different needs based on the materials you're going to use and the functionality that these toys are going to have, which impacts your design. So you have to make sure that you didn't just sculpt something really well. It has to have some sort of engineering purpose or just kind of functionality that has to mesh with the creator's vision or the designer's vision. So yeah, it goes back to talking to the designer, and I'll let Winnie kind of talk about some of those considerations before you actually even start prepping for print.
Yeah. Wait, so what was the exact question? Sorry, I got excited when I saw Kira. Hi, Kira. We used to work together at Nickelodeon. She was on the Fisher-Price side. Yeah, we did a bunch of really cute Shimmer and Shine toys together.
Yeah. So let's imagine for a second that we are finished with one of these pieces, and now you want to change your mindset from sculpture into 3D print because you want to see if this works. What are some of the things that you do inside of ZBrush, or even moving it into the next step of the 3D print pipeline?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so much to consider. I mean, like first it's like who's buying this, who's our demographic, you know, and then next would be, is there a safety situation that we should be considering? Is there something very sharp perhaps in this design that we need to soften or smooth out? Because when you print it, you don't want when you go into production, you don't want a kid to get poked or hurt in any way. You also want to consider like the physics and the dynamics of it. Is it too top heavy? Is it going to fall over? Most people really like their toys to stand. If it doesn't stand, then does it come with a doll stand, or does it come with a stand that you can, you know, plug it into? So those are just three like main considerations that we think about all the time. Yeah. But there's so much more too that's very specific to the project that I can't really think of off the top of my head. It kind of just depends.
I think a simpler question answer too, if it's not like a question directed towards like the actual production of a final toy that's going to go to market, if it's just like, how do I start 3D printing it? You know, earlier the better, because even though you're doing 3D stuff, it's not reality, and you'd be surprised like holding it in your hand and seeing it in different lighting conditions and just kind of feeling it in different positions and putting your fingers across. Also, you're like, oh, these fingers are really small in ZBrush, and then you realize like when you output it, they're even smaller, and you're like, huh,
Yeah.
are they going to break, or do I even like it like that? So some of these things really change when you see them in real life. And the biggest thing I would suggest is like, if you want to be quick about it, just dynamesh everything. It'll make it watertight, and just like print something that doesn't have joints if possible, or you don't have to like do keys and break them off. If you could just print it just to get a sense of like where it's going, I think that's useful. I think after that, you do start have to consider like what's the best way to kind of cut it, both for what's manufacturable / like what kind of printer do you have. Is it going to create lines? Sometimes FDM printers, if you put it all together, you're going to get lines. So you might want to split areas so they can independently print and not have that kind of issue. But yeah, along the way, overhangs, undercuts, it really depends on your printer.
Yeah.
Seeing if you've like sculpted something, like for example in hair, like you'll have these like pockets. Sometimes Dynamesh will take care of it. Sometimes your printer won't care. But yeah, just being mindful of like weird things that you're like, there's like a bubble in there somewhere, or something that your printer might get confused with. I think just checking your models kind of makes you a cleaner modeler as well, if you check your models that way. I started doing this interesting thing. I don't know if you have any suggestions, Ian, but what I end up doing now, just to make sure what my wall thickness is, you don't want things to be too thin sometimes, depending on what kind of support you're going to have. But I ended up just adding a cube to my 3D prints and using that to kind of slice. I'll show you right now. So I created a cube. I'm going to go to my potential 3D print. I'm going to append that. You can do this with any shape too, just for fun. And then turn that into a subtractive Boolean by clicking this little subtractive circle next to it. And then I'm going to go onto live Boolean. So you can't see it yet because the cube is somewhere else. Let me just put it into its place. I don't know where it went, but let me give it one second.
Have you click the cube and then hit solo for a second?
And it's like down there.
Yep, there you go. Yep, perfect.
Yeah. Let's see where it is.
Where's the cube?
Oh, it's huge. There it is. Okay, here we go. Subtracting everything now.
Where did you go?
Let me turn off live Boolean because it's probably cutting it out. Okay, here we go. So the idea is that this Boolean is going to show you what the 3D printer is going to see.
Oh, cool.
You can cut it in every direction to kind of see the thickness, and just see kind of problem areas or holes and whatnot. You can also polyfill it. Let's see, polypaint it with a color so that you can kind of see the surface that it's cutting onto.
Yep.
And then you can kind of see like, oh, that's, looking like that. I just did this on a product that was like has many pieces, and I realized like it was way too brittle for like the type of force it would need. But you can kind of just check where those things are.
No. This is good, actually. Yeah, I just shared a link in the chat too. We did a whole last month a DPP series where we demystify post-production. For those who want to know what DPP stands for, and we actually talked about 3D printing, prepping. Like the first video is all about key cutting. The second one, which is shared, is about creating the keys and the separation of files. So definitely check that out too for more in depth on that. But yeah, this is a great resource on how you actually would go and do that. So.
Yeah, and the rest is like, try it. You'll figure it out too. Like your printer will tell you. You're like, this didn't work at all.
Yep. Yeah, there's a ton of methods. There's also like, we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole, but there's actually like a thickness checker with polypaint, and you can set your scale, and then it'll tell you if it's minimal. Some artists too will take a cube, we'll set it to the size of what we want it to be. So let's just say like 25.4 millimeter. And then from there, they'll take another one that's exactly like, 3 or 4 millimeter thickness. And then that cube, they'll just check the fingers, they'll check the ears, they'll just dance that cube around. And if they can't see the cube, it's good. If they see the cube, it's not good. So that's a really down and dirty way of doing it, but it works.
Yeah, totally. I think there's also, if you have C4D or another product like that, then there's other things you want to kind of implement there and just check lighting, if you want to like take it out of other software to C4D just to see materials. You're like, some materials will absorb light, some of them will reflect it, some of them will be in between. And again, lighting really changes your form. I mean, that sculpture is all about form, so lighting obviously affects it. And just kind of taking it into different lighting conditions before you print, if you want, is also helpful to consider. Like I think I've seen a lot of things with the chin, for example, like this downlighting situation or this kind of Z material. If you go back to like this other one, the basic material, where you can kind of definitely mess around with the lighting, I think that's important in ZBrush. But sometimes these are matte caps, so they're kind of simulating something that's not physically accurate, which is perfect for sculpting. But sometimes you'll be like, oh, the chin looks fine, and then you print it and you're like, you realize like the chin or the cheeks feel more like, wider, because in your head, this dark area wasn't really being accounted for. But when you take this in real life, shadows aren't this sharp. You'll see that form, so it'll look more like a full shape. So I think either taking it to another program or rendering it here with Redshift or outputting it will really kind of tell you, hey, I really need to change this because I thought it was going to look like this and the lensing's different. Yeah, those are a few more details on like the 3D printing of it.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. No, that's super awesome and spot on too. Yeah, the lighting helps so much in ZBrush. So cool. So I am checking for questions. So yeah, so here's an interesting one too, which is how did you remesh the face? How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's good because I was like, let's switch over to that other one to break it down further. But I like keeping this separate. I mean, it depends like on the mood. Like I showed you that sketchy approach to sculpting, but if I'm doing it this way, you don't have to mess around with like this area, the bridge of the nose or the nasal labial fold area. If you had this merged, you'd be like, I got to resculpt that surrounding area. So I like to merge once I feel like the nose is fine, the ears are in a pretty good place, for example, and then just make sure that, I mean, it is preference that I just kind of have them in a decent subdivision, just even if it's smoothing. And then I just move everything upwards in the subtool area. So I got the ears, I got the head, and I got the nose. And the eyelids, I think, are also useful. Sometimes it's hard to sculpt those. That's why they're separate, just to give it a separate form. And then I just push everything up, and then, yeah, so I just merge them down until everything is together. Let's solo it out so you can see what that looks like. So it's just those elements. And then depending on the scale of your model, like you'll have to see where your resolution's at, but I just hit Dynamesh. Too much, you see, that's terrible. Okay, let's go higher.
That's perfectly quadded.
Yeah, final. So yeah, it depends on like how tight that kind of like base geometric forms were and how much you're down. But I think I like this because I wasn't like too precise with those forms. It's kind of blocky, but then I can just subdivide and kind of smooth it out.
Lovely.
The next stage to this would be like, okay, it's like pretty high res. It's not going to allow me to do anything. So this is, I don't know if it's more advanced for some people. I duplicate it. I ZBrush it to something like that's fairly low. And then I'll reproject to a higher level so that I have that range of being able to go down to a low res and a high res at the same time. Yeah, so not perfect, but check it out. So we have this high res one and the lower res one. And you want to have control over that. So I'm just going to hide everything real quickly. there is a better way, let me know of hiding.
Hold shift and press one of the eyes. It hides everything, and then you can go in and just click the ones you want to have visible. Or also too, you see above the subtools here, you have V1, V2, V3. So you can have everything on V1. So go to V1 real quick, and then press shift and turn on one of the eyes so that everything gets turned on. Boop. Okay, now go to V2. And so this is like, think of it like a subfolder. Now you can just turn on one or two things. So you can say like, okay. And then if you click back to V1, everything's on. Click back to V2, everything but those subtools are off.
Beautiful. I love that. Awesome. So yeah, V2 now just has these two. I liked, you know, in production, just for your own sanity and then everybody else's sanity, is start naming your things. Don't just randomly leave them. And don't say final versions of them. Just put version 1, 2, or 3. Nothing's ever final. Just keep an eye of like final is number 13 in my head. But yeah, so in this case, it's head high res.
I do everything final underscore. Whoops, sorry.
Whoops, sorry. This really is final.
Yeah, I promise this time.
Too.
And then second art director's like, actually, it's not final. Hate to break it to you.
Final.
So yeah, now that you have one, this is the little, you know, ZBrush one that I just did. I subdivided it, and this is the Dynamesh one. Just project all with those only visible ones that you want to be projected. That's why I hit everything. If you project everything, then you're going to have a bunch of other junk. So now you can see that the Dynamesh one and the ZBrush one are pretty much the same, except one has different levels of subdivision, which allows like easy modification of like ears instead of being limited to like a high res thing that you might get like tool marks by like pulling too much detail. So you can decide to do detail or go lower and just be broader with it without having too much detail interference. So that's kind of like how I approach some of these things.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, great stuff. And we have some cool questions coming in as well, which is and we spend a lot of time talking about the sculpting phase of it, which I personally love. I mean, you know, it's really cool. So here we have another one. What's the difference between sculpting and orthographic and perspective? If I print a model sculpted in ortho, will it be different in the real world?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Orthographic is a conceptual lens where it's like completely flat, versus our eyes, I think, are between 50 something millimeters to 60 millimeters. If you buy like a traditional lensed camera and you go to 60, that's how our eyes see. So that's what we're used to doing in terms of like sculpting. Orthographics, I think, is for lining things up, like wheels and I don't know, sometimes some profiles. But yeah, I think you have to consider that most things will be viewed with human eyes, and they're not about precise measurements. Orthographics I use for measurements and seeing if things lay flat, or just to check things here and there. But yeah, perspective, I think the latest ZBrush is set to be around that kind of field of vision, or field of view with our eyesight. And then considering the scale of your object is something important. If you have like a 200-foot statue, your eyes are 60 millimeter lenses looking at a 200-foot statue, versus you have something up your head. The closest it gets, the more distorted it gets. You know, when you look at your phone and you get your selfies taken when they're too close, you're like, I don't look like that. It's like, that's true, you don't. But the lens is closer to your face, so everything kind of gets distorted. So similar kind of consideration. I think it's important to output that, or just kind of put something in perspective quite often.
Yeah.
No.
In toys, we always print it out because you just want to physically hold it in your hand and look at it from every single angle, and you might see things that you wouldn't see digitally. Like you were saying, like sometimes the lighting is strange, or the material it looks fine digitally, but then when you see it in real life, maybe it actually has like bigger cheeks that you wouldn't have noticed, you know, on screen. So or maybe they're just like little dents or something in there that you didn't even notice at all. So it's always good, once you think it's at a good place, print it out, hold it in your hand, and just rotate it and really, really look at it with your human eye.
Oh yeah. There's also something magical about a thing you made and then you printed it out and then you're like,
for sure.
I made that.
Yeah, it's like making a new friend. Like, I made you.
Exactly. I am a god. No.
Right, right.
JC, I want to see those nails. Can you get up close on those nails? Oh my god, those are so
Very
Quite
blocked out. Very blocked out. Stuck on nails.
those are nice. Where did she get those acrylics? Oh my
Oh.
God.
Just max on acrylics. Just set it
Oh, exactly.
I think this is
Love
a good
that.
example of what we're asking people to do. You know, draw this in your style. It has been done. I think sculpt it in your style would be really exciting, both for people that are starting or just more advanced. I think happy accident. I don't know if it was an accident, but the kind of simple shapes helps you kind of take it in any direction, but also be really approachable at the same time. I did use this character to kind of jump into a higher version as I did here, and I just kept going with it. I'll show you that little eel later. But the idea was to kind of use that and show that you could do anything with it. One of my favorite tools is to mask things off and extract to create shapes as I go. So like these are just masked off. Ideally, I would have shown you guys a little bit more of a progression, but it's like a baking show. The cake has been baked, and I'll show you a few things on top of that cake now.
No, that's fantastic.
JC's
Yeah.
been watching a lot of Great British Bake Off too, by the
Oh,
way.
yeah.
So it's on the mind.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, cake is delicious too. So come on, let's get real. Now we just have to make her a cake hat. That's the requirement now. So you've mentioned cake like 2-3 times.
Everybody's hungry now. Give me that cake.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. We do have a couple more questions too coming in, and I think I'll pop this question up. You kind of touched on like ZBrushing the face and your approach on that, but this question is they were just wondering if you were to merge the ear with the head in your model, how would you go about it while preserving the intricate details? Which of course you showcased a little bit of the projecting aspect, but they're just curious if you had any other approaches or techniques you might be able to use.
Yeah, if you want to go really hardcore with production, you're gonna retopologize it by hand. So I'm not gonna go through that one here, but yeah, I would generally do the same thing you saw, where I keep the Dynamesh high res one separate subtool, and then a Z-remeshed one. Obviously, everything's been merged and Dynameshed as well. Projecting that, and if there's any projection errors, just getting closer to it and masking areas out to see if I can continue to Z-project that area. Or, I mean, as sculptors, just see if you can resculpt it. You know what I mean? I feel like that's something that's okay. You'd be surprised how many times people just resculpt intricate things. It should be something more of like practice. But if you want to maintain it even further, you start retopologizing it, where you kind of plot out the polygons by hand so that it retains the flow and it respects your form, whether in low res and high res, which is ideal for animation as well. But I find like clean topology helps support your forms, and it kind of de-stresses me when I try to change things around. This one hasn't been retopologized, but you can see that it goes somewhat low. The ear is separate because I'm not finished with it, but I'll do the same thing where I merge everything at a high resolution, Dynamesh it, and then re-project it once I'm done. If there's any errors, or sculpt it, I'll just kind of go back in there.
Nice,
She's
very
so
cool.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That actually leads into this next question, because you touched on it a little bit, which is pretty cool, which is what are the differences between making a statue for toys versus making animatable? Like, for example, the round eyes with lids for animation.
I think there's parallels. I think if you've worked in animation or production, it sometimes helps to know that you can retopologize and make things super clean. I think sometimes it's hard to get really perfect curves or perfect shapes when you're sculpting by hand. So that consideration itself, you're like, I'm just going to retopologize it. I'm going to get a perfect form and be able to do it that way. But generally speaking, you could get away with a lot more in toys in some instances where you're just sculpting. You're not worried about this like topology in this case, for example. If you were to do this for animation, I think it's great. It's all quads. it's like chicken mesh, you know, you can kind of like move it, it won't break. So it just helps you pose things easily and kind of distort them in animation. So that's a consideration. It's a little bit more tedious to get it clean if it was more complicated, but it also helps you sculpt variations a lot easier, so you don't have to worry about like redoing it. But yeah, the differences would be like, I think animation production sometimes is a little bit stricter in like the rules of like how it needs to end up working for both lighting, rigging, asset management. If you're doing animation for games, that's a trickier one because there's a polygon count that definitely requires a lot of like engineering. It starts to become less creative. It's more like, oh, you got to hit these limits and be creative with where you plot these. But yeah, there's a range. I would say, in my experience, a little bit more flexible in toys until it gets to slicing things up and prepping it for print. Whereas if it's an engineered part, now you have to be considering of like, these shapes can't just be roughed clay buildup. You know what I mean? Like that area needs to be functioning and rotating. So, but yeah, hopefully that it kind of covers more than one point.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head, which is super awesome. I also just throw this out there just because if you're in 2023, 2024, and you're using Dynamesh because you love it so much, like me, there's a feature called Proxy Pose that will actually reduce that, will reduce the density of the mesh down so you can pose it and then you can snap it back to Dynamesh, which is pretty cool.
Let's try it out.
Yeah. What?
There we
Yep.
go. So that's very low res.
Yeah, very low res. So there's a slider there. Like if you were to hit just Control Z Control Z, and then that slider right there, you can actually push it up or down to showcase. And it's creating a proxy cage. So therefore, it's not projecting in any way. It's just creating an additional cage that captures all the points and where things live in space. And then you can turn around and pose it, and then you can snap it back. And it works with Dynamesh as well as subdivided models.
I love that because I'm sure you've experienced this before, Ian. It's like you have tons of parts. They're like in a boring A pose or T pose, and you're like, man, I just really wish it was like in a dynamic pose, but there's just so many parts, and I have to merge them and figure out how to like maintain the detail. And as you know, like if you have like a bent arm, like sometimes that becomes a pain because you'll lose the bicep detail, you'll lose like your elbow. It just gets really messy. And I think a lower resolution kind of helps you play around with you're not looking at detail too, which is kind of fun to like not worry about too much detail. This is like where you start getting into gesture, you know, and you're like, yes, I just want to have like a wavy thing. This is perfect for where I was going with this too. This is an eel that is a family of eels, like Medusa for the mermaid. So I needed to merge this in order to have like fun strands. I had it like a stiff straight, and I was like, how am I gonna make it into a hair? Here it is. So here I hit I unclick proxy pose. Is that what it is?
You just unclick it. Yep. And then give it a second. And I've done this to 50, 60 million vertice like models. It takes a second though. So like, because it's now calculating all the different points in space it needs to move the mesh. And also too, it's looking for subdivisions versus Dynamesh, just making sure it puts it all back. So yeah, it's such a clean way of doing it. You could even proxy pose and then send it to T-pose transpose master, pose it that way, then send it back, and then snap the details back. So
yeah, I know we've been talking a lot about sculpture stuff, but there's a lot to be learned from a 2D approach too when we do these things. So like Whitney and Lauren can talk about that, just like gesture. There's sometimes a steeper curve in 3D because there's technical days. You're like, I'm just stuck technically. Versus drawing, it's just like, well, you need to learn how to draw well, first of all. But I don't think you're like, why is this file not opening? Why is this feature thing, you know, or am I doing it right? It's just like, are you drawing? So I think there's something interesting to be said about design iteration. And when you have designers, they do that more often than 3D artists. So sometimes it's really good to kind of interface with a designer or an artist that can draw, or you draw yourself, in my opinion, so that you can kind of take a break from technical things, but also discover where you can go. I think gesture is something that I'm always talking about for 3D. I'm like, it needs more life. It needs more expression. But yeah, I'd love to hear some of your approaches, Whitney and Lauren, about like how do you make things look alive and flowy, and how do you kind of apply that to maybe the stuff that you're seeing right now?
Just in general, the gesture process. I mean, the drawing process, you would need to use like a line of action. Here, I put up one of my mermaids. This is like I said when I create earlier on in the live, when I create a character or a drawing, I'm really motion focused and shape silhouette focused. So I want to make sure that not only is there a line of action, but your eye is traveling and it's moving in different areas. And mermaids are a great, character to do that because you're underwater. You have a lot of freedom to move the hair in any direction you want, and the tail flukes and stuff like that. So I also like to push and exaggerate against the limitations of like real anatomy. Not too much, obviously, if we're translating a character into 3D, but in order to create that illusion of movement or stretching or pulling, maybe you have to bend the elbow in a certain direction to kind of like make it flow. At least that's what I do. What about you, Whit?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think a really good example of squash and stretch in 3D would be Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs from Sony. Like they said, screw it, like let's make crazy 3D that looks 2D, and I don't know, I was just thinking about like how you don't necessarily have to worry too much about the rigidity of 3D if you just have like a really clear vision for like how you're going to go about doing it technically. But in terms of 2D, yeah, I like to just get super loosey-goosey with it. I engage my shoulder, like I put my back into it, like and just see like how fluid I can make it, and then I reel it in. I'll dial it back, and again, like try and put my 3D hat on and be like, okay, like how is this going to actually physically function, and not just in 3D, but then also in like three-dimensional, in toys and physical, tangible toys. So there's a lot to consider, but when I first start, I throw it all out the window. Like I don't want to think about the end result. I want to just have fun, and that's where the magic is. And then once you harness that magic, you can apply all these other technical things to it. But if you go in with this rigidity, then you're never going to have something that feels like there's a soul, if that makes sense. Is that too hokey?
You got to be loose at first. You have to be loose.
Yeah.
Yep. No, seeing form and function, seeing the flow, the shape, a lot of this stuff brings the character to life, right? So when you're looking at something, for me, like A pose, T pose, you can do some cool tricks to make it look a little bit more organic. But when you're ready to experience the personality of the character, I really feel like that's when picking the right pose really comes to play.
And selling the idea too, like you gotta wow people. So in order to do that, you create that killer pose that tells the story, feels expressive. There's a whole entire story in just one image, and then once everybody falls in love with it, then you go to 3D. But you're never going to get to 3D if people don't first fall in love with that really animated story, that you created in the illustration.
Yep, that's super cool. So right now, we're going about an hour and a half ish and stuff like that. I know we mentioned obviously what Mer-May is, and we mentioned like the concepting into it and then into the sculpting application. So if people wanted to sculpt their own style of this Mer-May, take the file that was there, which we'll drop in the link, a link in the chat again. You can download the base mesh and you can work off of that. Where could they then find you? Where could they tag you so you can see what they've done?
Yeah, you can tag mermay_official on Instagram. We have a new TikTok account as well. Whitney, what's the name of that? Is it mermay_official?
Same thing, mermay_official. I'm gonna double check, but yeah.
I thought Tom's original account was the same, but I wasn't sure if he changed it.
Yeah, ours is mermay_official, exactly the same as it is on Instagram.
Great. And if you do want to partake in the Sculpt This in Your Style challenge of Lily, we would love to see that. You can use the hashtag Lily, or sorry, let me pull up what is the hashtag? Lily STIYS is a hashtag that we can go check it out. But tagging the account is really what, helps us get our eyes on work. So make sure to go follow us on Instagram. You can see a bunch of beautiful mermaids. Follow the hashtag. That's really fun. We also, Whitney and I would love to see like collaborations with 2D artists. If there's any 3D artists out there that maybe wants to pair up with a friend, or maybe you've met somebody through Mer-May online that their designs speak to you, maybe you could pair up and make something fun together just for fun. We would
That'd be so great. We'd totally feature that. We also have a Discord channel that's always popping, and we love all of our Discord mermaid people. So if you want to join in there, you'll see a bunch of really great art that's being shared all the time, round the clock. It's global, so it's cool. Like any time of the day or night, there's somebody chatting about, the prompts or just art and creativity and just the world of being an artist. So you'll probably find some friends in there and maybe find a great collaborator.
Yeah.
Yes. And
what else? Creative. She's in the Discord right now. Hi, Abby.
Hey, yes. Oh my gosh, thanks for coming. But yeah, also, we have this amazing contest, as Lauren mentioned. There's an illustration contest and there's an animation contest. So anybody who's interested in animation, 3D, 2D, stop motion, whatever you're into, please join, and we have amazing prizes. So I hope you guys check us out and follow the account and just enjoy the month of May. It's so creative. It's so inspiring. The community is so wholesome and sweet. It's really nice. So yeah, thanks for checking out what we're doing here, and hopefully we'll see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. We do fun lives too. We have actually one of our celebrity guest judges is Tia Carrera.
Yeah.
Yes, from Wayne's World and True Lies.
Yeah, she's the voice of Nani and Lilo and Stitch, and she's going to be in the live action version of Lilo and Stitch, and she's going to come on to the Mer-May Instagram account second day of May 2nd, and she'll talk to Whitney and I, and hopefully she'll let us draw her, and we'll just talk about all of the fun things that she's done, and maybe her judging criteria. So she's going to be a really fun judge. Also, another fun celebrity judge. We have so many amazing judges, but we got John Musker, the writer-director of the original Disney Little Mermaid, to come on the judge panel, and he is going to join us. Hopefully, we're still working out logistics, but he's going to join us live on Instagram as well. So we'll post everything to the page, but make sure to head there and take a look at everything that we're doing. We have quite a lot of events during
Dude, Lauren and I, we basically put on a show. We're like, let's make a show on Instagram. And we have these great live events. But what's really fun too is like the thought that your work that you put out there will be seen by John Musker, Tia Carrera, Stephen Thompson, Molly Idol, like people who are so prolific in their very specific industries. Like Tia actually won 2 Grammy Awards for 2 different Hawaiian albums that she created. And then of course, she's an actress and a voiceover actress. And then we have people in Kid Lit. We have toy designers like Steven. We have anime artists.
Manga artists. In general, some really amazing social media like stars on our list. So we've got a really, just the fact that they're going to be looking at your work is a win in itself, right?
Yes. Yeah. I remember one year we had Jodie Benson, the voice of Ariel, and she picked her favorite illustrations of the year, and some of them were my favorite too. And even just knowing that she had similar taste as me, I was like, oh, that like meant a lot to me. And it's just, there's so much fun little nuanced stuff that we do that brings us so much joy, and I hope that it brings other people joy too. So I look forward to this year. It's going to be the biggest year yet. I'm pretty confident.
Oh, for
No,
sure.
that's fantastic. Yeah, and it's all about having fun, and it's all about going through and just making something really cool. So, it was awesome to have you guys come on here and talk about what the event is, but also your process and how you utilize ZBrush in the pipeline to get something so from 2D to 3D all the way to 3D printing. I think that's fantastic. I just like my last question is for you, which is when you do 3D prints, which printers do you use? What is something that's like, do you do FDM? Do you do resin? What printers?
Yeah, so we have the Bamboo Labs here, which is filament. Bamboo Labs is cool. We just got it, and the filament options are really interesting. Like, there's some really strong stuff out there, but there's also a lot of really there are a lot of beautiful colors. So we get to really experiment with these ombre filaments, or like these fleshy ones, or these matte ones, these navy blue ones. They're just beautiful. And then we also have this anycubic resin printer that ZBrush so lovingly gave to us. And so we're really excited to try that one out. We haven't gotten into it yet because I haven't got the resin. But once we do, we're going to have really beautiful, flawless prints. Because the Bamboo Labs, though, it is really high res for what it is. It's not flawless. Like, you'll still get one side where you're pulling off all the I always forget the name of it, but
The supports.
The supports,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it's going to look kind of strange in one area, whereas resin is going to look so nice. So we want to get that going. But those are our two printers, and they're great.
The filament printer was really, like, Whitney, I'm from a distance watching this project happen, and whenever you would send me videos or like take a little snapshot of the versions, the different iterations of her, I could not see the lines. You would have to like zoom in, and I'm like, wow, that is like spectacular. And even now, like, you can barely see. But you guys did that strategically. You like printed her on her side, and
we tried all different types of alignments. It's been like a lot of trial and error, but I'm happy to hear you say that. That's so nice.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I'm like, oh, that looks great. And you're like, no, remember, this is the film. This is the prototype. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can't tell. It's so nice.
That's awesome. Oh, I'm so glad.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, okay. So actually, I have one more question. Do you guys have the link to your Discord? If you throw it in the chat, we can.
I just saw someone say that the Discord link expired. I'm not so great with Discord, but it's unfortunate that it expires after a certain amount of time. Let me grab that for you right now.
It's just to make your life difficult. That's all.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we've been getting comments about people saying that the link isn't working a lot lately. And I wonder, is there like...
I think it expires. I just didn't know it expired in like a day. I thought it was like you get a week or something.
So every day you're going to have to upload the link.
I guess. I'm not sure.
Oh, look, someone, that one 3D artist says you can edit the link to never expire. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing. So now I
just like that, the community comes in clutch.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Welcome to the Mer-May community. Thank you for helping us.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Chat that thinks that they're going to take a stab at this, sculpt this in your style. Does anyone have plans who can, I don't know, compare to JC's superb Medusa mermaid here? JC, her little smirk on her face that was nice. That was a nice one.
Yeah, gotta give her a little gesture with her stiff arms.
I just dropped the Discord link in there too.
Very cool.
That works. Let me know, you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, dude, she's looking so good. I love her. I love the Medusa moray eels so much, and we have a prompt on our list that's mythology. So I think that we should post her for that day.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, there was a prompt that's a moray. That was gonna be my pick, but we ended up changing it. I think it ended up being birthday.
Oh yeah, because it was your birthday. That was your birthday.
That's right.
Happy birthday.
Oh, Scott Unruh says I'm all in. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may have to do a mermaid myself. So
Yes,
send that out there. That might be a stream. That might be next week's stream.
Oh, perfect! Amazing.
So, oh, cool. Well, okay. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. This is super awesome. Everybody go check out their Discord, go follow them, because again, it's just an amazing contest / project. And it's also just a really good way as a community for all of us to get together and connect and just share some art and have a good time while doing it. So thank you guys again, Whitney, JC, Lauren, thank you so much for being here. It's such an amazing to have you. And any last words before we wrap up?
Just thank you so much for having us. This was so much fun. And JC, you're the most amazing teacher. I'm just like in awe of you always.
Yes, and thank you, Ian, for having us. This was fun.
Yeah, and Kyle, he's in the background.
Yeah. Shout out to Kyle in the background. He's always doing the magic. Without him, it wouldn't be as easy. So cool. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for showing up for this hour and a half special. And I look forward to seeing your mermaids. So also feel free to tag us at Max on ZBrush. Let us know what you're sculpting, because we'd like to see it as well. And yeah, that being said, have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye. Thank you. See ya.
Bye.